I think it's huge to have people in your life that are going to push you to push your boundaries instead of the opposite. And usually that's who's in your life is the people that are the opposite. Like,
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Moeller, and on this podcast, we will be interviewing guests that have made their mark in real estate, in business, and in other areas of life. Listening to podcasts myself has helped me in so many different ways and continues to do so. If you're a real estate investor or an entrepreneur or aspiring to be either, or just someone that wants to learn, you've come to the right place. An easy way to have an impact is to share this episode with friends or family, provide a review, or just spread the word. We greatly appreciate it, and now let's get to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. Very excited to have today's guest on, Todd Dexheimer. Todd, how are you doing today?
good, Phil. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no problem. So for our listeners, Todd is the co-founder of Endurus Capital. Todd is out of Minnesota. He has two kids, and he also has a podcast, Pillars of Wealth Creation, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But before we get into any of that, Todd, kind of tell us high level your story, your background, and what brought you to today.
Yeah. So high level. I started as a high school shop teacher, teaching, woods, metals, all that kind of fun stuff. I still got all 10 fingers, so that's a good thing. I taught for about 5 years. The last couple of years, though, honestly, even the first year, I was like itching to do something else. I got that ADD brain. Like I just like want to be doing stuff. And anyway, so I'm like, I remember telling my wife like almost right away, I'm like, I got to figure out what I'm gonna do when I grow up. And I was just started teaching. And then as I was teaching, so that was I think my first year teaching was 2005. By 2008, I was investing in real estate and I'm buying single families, duplexes, I'm flipping houses. I'm pretty busy doing the real estate thing. I have my first kid 2009, 2009. I'm like, hey, tell my wife I got to quit. I want to do this thing full time. She says, no way. So I end up doing it part time and just continue to buy and buy and buy. And I'm, like I said, I'm buying single families, duplexes, flipping houses, keeping them for rentals. And by 2010, looked at my wife and told her I needed to quit my job and do this full time. And, God intervened. We went to church and the pastor was telling us essentially like, when somebody like looks at like they're talking on a big stage, but you swear they're looking at you like
Yep.
in your soul. That was literally what was happening to both of us. And, the sermon he gave made us realize like, I do need to quit my job. So we, in silence, are driving home and my wife finally cracked and she says, you can quit your job. Just show me the numbers. So we went through the process. I quit my job, started doing the real estate thing. And now fast forward to today, we're buying mostly our main bread and butter is apartment buildings. So we're buying 100+ unit apartment buildings in the Midwest. We also own some assisted living, some retail, some light industrial. And so, yeah, that's kind of where we're at today. We've got, roughly, well, I think we've done over 5,000 units,
Wow.
half a billion in real estate over the last, a decade plus.
That's pretty impressive. And I want to go back maybe first to even the church story, which I think is really, really neat. And just, I think being open to that is important if you're a person of faith or whatever it is, just being open and you have your mind on something, but looking for the signs or the signals, like guide me in a direction. So I think that's a really neat story. And I appreciate you sharing it. Um, Talk a little bit about, so you said you started with single family homes and duplexes. How long did you do that? How'd that go? Any kind of, uh,
Yeah.
wisdom you took from that, and when did you transition and why, perhaps?
Yeah, so I did that for a long time. I started buying in 2008 and and really started buying a lot in 2008, 2009. I didn't just dabble and continued to buy until 2015, I think was really one of my last purchases, maybe 16. And it was really kind of where I faded off. I was flipping a lot of houses. I was keeping a lot for rentals. And so basically, I would every like, it wasn't a science. I didn't plan it exactly like this, but every three flips I did, I would keep one as a rental. So I built up a nice rental portfolio of single families, duplexes, fourplexes, couple small apartment buildings, and had, 100 of those, and flipped about 100 properties. And so, did it for a while. Yes, what did I learn? I mean, holy cow, so many things. First of all, I learned that I did not love flipping. It was a means, uh, it was a job,
Yep.
but it was a way to continue to buy and be active, and it, quite frankly, it kind of, uh, it was fulfilling to an extent, right? It was just, I'm I like to be going and moving and doing, and so it was definitely something that continued to move me and make me do, is flipping houses. Um, but look, I don't know. I would say the biggest thing I learned along that way is just kind of managing the day to day chaos and hectic, life of being an entrepreneur. There's always something thrown at you that you're not going to expect. There's always financially, something that's uncomfortable. There's just always something happening, and having that much chaos in the flipping business and then buying the rentals and doing all that really allowed me to, I guess, embrace it, see it, and learn from it, and try to, maybe lessen the chaos, I guess,
To-
through, systems and, partners and, relationships that I've built. So
And there's a couple things couple paths like we could take there. But first, you started in 08, 09, not majorly impacted by the financial. I mean, I don't want to go completely down that rabbit hole. Sorry,
yeah,
but not a
yeah.
great time maybe to start. Maybe you could have waited a year or two. Was that a big impact to you?
It was actually the perfect time to start to. So when I was buying, the market had already crashed, but it was crashing
Okay.
still. So I'm buying properties for still pretty cheap prices. But at the same time, those prices were continuing to decline.
Yep.
So like, my first flip, I ended up really making no money on it, because as I bought it, the values continued to go down. And so every dollar I put into it, we would continue to lose all of our equity, and to where I sold it, I didn't lose money, but it didn't really make money, and did a lot of work to it. My single family home, that was my first rental property. I bought it for a great price. I bought it for $65,000. I put some money into it, but I did all the work myself. And, rented it out, was making $1,400 a month, gross income. So it worked really well. But
Yeah.
at the same time, that property value did go down. I bought the property two houses down, a year and change later. I bought the property two houses down, in much better condition, by the way, for about $20,000 less. And so if you took in the condition, probably like $40,000 less,
Well,
really.
I think there's a couple of lessons from there. First of all, the nature of how you were buying the houses or the flips, you had two exit options. So just having multiple ways to exit, one being you could sell the house, two being you could just hold it and rent it. I think
Yeah.
possibly saved you because some of these you would have flipped if you would have sold them, you would have lost money versus you can just hold it, finance it. And by the way, the debt I'm assuming at that time was probably really favorable too. But the other thing you mentioned earlier that I'd like to ask more about is you talked about chaos. You talked about 100 units that are single family. That is a lot of single family homes and duplex units, regardless of what the makeup is. So how did you do that, and how did you get to the scale of 100 units?
Yeah. And that wasn't overnight, right? I mean, we were buying them over a course of from 2008 to 2015. And so, look, I wish I had a story of how amazing we were, and that said, like, hey man, we had all the systems and processes down, and I had all the people in place, and all that kind of stuff. But no, it was a lot of chaos, and there was a lot of just shooting from the hip, trying to figure it out. How do we get a little bit more efficient here? How do we get a little bit more efficient there? How do we you know, make profit here. I lost a lot of profit because of the inefficiencies, the trying to do it all myself too. That's a probably a big thing I continue to oh learn or not learn, I guess, over the years. Is I always tend to want to do it myself, and so how do we grow and scale? Yeah, I mean, certainly it was a lot of hard work and grind and all of that. But yeah, I mean, we put the systems in place to allow us to grow. Um, we put the right people in place, sometimes the wrong people, but try to always put the right people in place to get the support that we would need to grow and to be able to continue to scale. But it was it was messy, Phil. It wasn't beautiful. Like if you just look back, it was messy. It wasn't
I want
refined at all.
I want to ask you about the try to do it all myself mindset because I struggle with that too. We're in the process of kind of building with some team members, things like that, where I'm constantly working on that. But does that start with limiting beliefs as to what we have to do or what other can like? What is the psychology maybe behind trying to do it all ourselves?
So my psychology, I know 100%. My psychology it was from my parents and from people that I grew up around that would say, if you want to do it right, do it yourself. That was always the mentality. Like, what? I'm just going to do it myself. I'll get it done. Right. I'm not going to wait for this person to come here. I'm going to do it myself. The other part was my parents were just not wealthy at all. Right. So if the furnace goes out, my dad's going to first try to fix it himself. Right. If the roof is leaking, he's going to get up on the roof and he's going to do everything he can before he calls somebody to fix it because we don't have the money to do it. So I'm learning from watching my dad, and I probably do the same thing for my kids. My kids probably see me doing way too much that I never call somebody because I now know how to do it all. So why would I call somebody else? So I'm probably passing on bad habits to them too. But I think the mindset, yeah, it's 100% mindset. It's either a fear mindset that you're doing it all yourself, or it's a mindset of that's just how you grew up and you're just used to it. And you're used to that, the belief of if you want it done right, you got to do it yourself.
Yeah, and I think for people it's important to try to understand that and understand, are there limiting beliefs behind this? Is this from when I grew up? Is this fear of something? I remember specifically on my very first rental house, there was a three-way switch at the top of the steps, and I tried to do it all and change it all myself. And guess what I did after I was done? And none of the lights worked at all. I said, okay, I'm just going to call somebody to fix this. And there's still after that, I would do it. I would just do things on my own. I'm
Yeah.
like, first of all, I'm not the best person at this. I'm not the right person to be doing this. I'm going to spend more money or break something or hurt myself if I
Yeah.
keep doing this stuff. So I think, but I think a lot of it comes from, the prior generation and the work ethic, DIY, save money, all those things. So
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's important to just for people to understand the driver behind the mindset.
Yeah. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. It depends on where you want to go in life and what you want to do. If you're going to try to grow and scale a business and make it a profitable business that can run maybe without you or even with you, but can grow and scale, you just got to get rid of that mindset or at least have to push it down quite a bit to allow other people to step in there. If you just want to own a duplex or two or three, like that's fine. Just go ahead and do it all yourself.
Well, so you talked about how you scale and how you got to the 100 unit or so portfolio of single family. What triggered the shift to multifamily or to different type of assets?
Yeah, good question. So I had a business partner during most of that time, and so when we were kind of I always wanted to buy apartment buildings, larger apartment buildings. I just for first of all, I didn't know how. I didn't have the money. But when we split, we were kind of going in different directions, and I looked at my whole portfolio and looked at, do the flips make sense? Do the rentals make sense? I said the rentals make more sense. Okay, if I want to continue the rentals, how do I actually grow a business? Can I continue to buy all these single family homes? And I'm kind of like doing the numbers. And I'm like, that just doesn't make sense. I can't continue to scale this. And as we grew, here's what I noticed with the rentals. My first, call it 10 rentals, are profiting, and the efficiency of the profit, they're $500 a month. Well, then as I add on more rentals and maybe I get my next 10, right? The first 10 no longer are making $500 because I'm having to hire people, more people, and we're getting bigger. And so now they make $400 and the other ones make $400. And as I grow, now instead of 500 and 400, now they're making 300. So I'm like, man, as I scale this thing, I'm making less profit per building. It doesn't make sense to keep on buying these little one-offs and grow that way. So, and by the way, at the same time, what's happening is they're becoming more expensive. 2015 prices started to really skyrocket
Yep.
in the single family home. So it wasn't making as much sense. So yeah, decided to jump into apartments, and I started buying just smaller, 10, 20 unit apartment buildings, to eventually scale to larger units. And I just figured out as I went too, the bigger I was getting, the bigger apartment building I was getting, the more scale. And quite frankly, like almost the less time I would spend on it. So I would, we would put as much time and effort, more time and effort into a 10 unit as we would into a 100 unit.
So when you bought the first, was there an apartment, and this question can apply to someone that wants to buy real estate or invest in something different, a business, whatever it might be. But what were the fears, or what was the mindset around that shift? Like, was it, nah, I'm just going to go do it, no concerns, let's go? Or was it there a lot of fears or concerns behind it?
Boy. Yeah, there's certainly were fears and concerns behind it, but I felt like I knew it was the right path. Just through looking at the financials, looking through, what kind of return can we get on our money. Now, the other thing is I went from buying in state to out of state.
Okay.
A plane flight away,
Yeah.
or a 14-hour drive, but I wasn't going to do that. Right. So I go from buying in my hometown to somewhere else. And so that's another layer of fear, is like, oh crap, like what if this doesn't work? I can't just go there. I've got a family. I can't just, move there. They're not going to like that. So yeah, there was some hesitation, some fear. But ultimately, it's where I knew I needed to go. I think when you have a strong enough conviction, right, strong enough reason for it, you're going to push forward and do it. Especially when you look at financially and go, this actually makes sense. Like I've thought this through. It's a lot easier to push through when and when you have a strong reason for it.
I think having clarity on what you want and why you want it can just make those decisions so much easier. Knowing, yeah, there's issues, there's challenges, there's concern, there's fears, but what will I say this a lot, but what will I wish I had done today, 5 years or 10 years from now? And continuing to do the same thing probably isn't the right answer. If you
Right.
were to do it again, though, and bring yourself back to when you didn't have all the experience. So in 2008, 2009, would you start, or what guidance would you give someone that was in a W-2? Would you start with single family and duplexes? Would you jump to 10 and 20? Like, again, now it's easy to say what you would do because you have all this knowledge and experience, but you
Right.
didn't have that then. So what would you
Right.
tell someone that was in your shoes 15 years ago?
So if I were to give myself advice with the same experience that I, had in 2008, so no experience, right? If I were to give the advice of, hey, don't buy that single family or that duplex, you got to go out and buy a big apartment building, 100 unit apartment building. Otherwise, just don't do it. I just never would have done it. I
Right.
never would have started. And so I hate the advice of you got to buy, it's not worth it unless you go buy a big apartment building. Now, it's worth getting started. That's the most important part. So get started with something as big as possible, that you can wrap your head around and actually start with, right? It's all about taking those first steps. Now, would I push myself to get uncomfortable and continue to stay uncomfortable and grow and scale earlier? Absolutely. One of the things I did is I was doing a lot of stuff. I'm not going to say I wasn't, because I was doing more deals than most people, but I wasn't pushing myself. I was doing the deals that were comfortable with me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I was just continuing to buy that cheaper single family home, that duplex, like wasn't pushing my boundaries. I bought, a couple small apartment buildings, but nothing like that really pushed my limits. So that's the one thing that I would say is like I got I just got, comfortable
Yeah. You know
doing
what?
the same thing for a
What
long time.
what's interesting is our stories are just really, really similar other than the time frame. I didn't buy my first single family house till 2013. I had not near as much as you 4 or 5 years later, maybe 20 doors or so, but it took like I was just doing the comfortables. Like once I did the first one, houses and duplexes were comfortable. So I just kept doing that for 4 years until, maybe this is going back to God or somebody else intervened and created basically some stress or some pain around it. And my wife, I just remember having a discussion. She's like, we were trying to debate how do we go from 20 doors to 80, or like how do we get to the next level, or we're just going to be in this grind for a long, long time. And there was I'll say air quotes discussion, something with my wife saying I didn't sign up for this because it was just a lot of work and all the transaction volume and everything. So sometimes it takes, first of all, it's better, I think, to challenge yourself and get out of your own, like get out of the comfort zone yourself and keep
Yeah.
taking incremental steps forward. But then if you don't do that, maybe there will be somebody or that intervenes and creates some chaos that ultimately is a step backwards that creates a big step forward. And it sounds like
Yeah.
the difference is you kind of created that yourself, something that shifted that says, okay, I got to take a big step and challenge myself more.
Well, I think there's a couple things that happened there. It's the partnership split that created that. And then I actually hired a mentor. Um, and he, we were talking, and I'm buying these 10, 20 unit buildings. And I was talking about a mutual friend, and said, I want to get where he is. And he says, well, why don't you go do it right now? And I'm like, well, I got to buy another, you know, I want to buy a couple more of these 20 units and then get up to like a 40, 50 unit, 60 unit. And then eventually I'll get to the 100 plus. And he just challenged me on that. And basically he's like, look, there's no reason you can't do it right now.
Yeah.
And it just triggered something in my brain. And I said, you know what? You're right. And within, a few months, I had 200 units under contract, and two different buildings, I guess. So a couple months I had an 84 unit, a couple more months I had a 100 plus unit, and just, but it's just that challenge, right? Somebody was like, no, you're thinking small, right?
Yep.
And it got me to go, okay, yeah, you're right. So I think it's huge to have people in your life that are going to push you to push your boundaries instead of the opposite. And usually that's who's in your life, is the people that are the opposite. Like, hey, are you sure you want to work this hard? Like, hey, you're doing a lot. Like, oh man, must be tough. And you're like, yeah, it is. Oh, I'm exhausted,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So
And it's interesting you say that because I wanted to make 2 points as you're wrapping up, but you made the one point, which is I think it's just I wrote down before you said that associate with people that are challenging you. And that's like there's people that are challenging you and trying to help you grow, especially if there's people that have been there, done that, or have had some experience, even if it's not in real estate, whatever it's in.
yeah,
Surrounding yourself with people like that are going to help you grow. The other thing for the new investors, the big thing, just the takeaways, just get started. Just take the first step. You did when you
yeah,
took that first step 15 or so years ago, you had no idea, or you probably didn't anticipate that you were going to have 5,000 units and just where it's at today. You
no,
were just trying to get to the first door or the second door or the third door, but look where the steps led. So just take that first step, have a little bit of faith, and keep moving forward. So both great points there. Um, I want to shift gears because you have your own podcast. So there's just probably so much wisdom that you have or you've picked up from other guests called Pillars of Wealth Creation. So, um, what is that? What is that? What does Pillars of Wealth Creation mean?
Yeah. So the kind of idea behind it is I wanted to figure out what other people, how other people are creating wealth and how they are growing and scaling. One of the things that what frustrated me the most about real estate investing is I would talk to all these people and they're so transactional. They're only worried about their next best deal. They're not focused on growing and scaling their business and creating something powerful. They are only focused on the deal. And that's mainly from my flipping days, right? Apartment investors and commercial investors are a lot different. They're much more business orientated. Where the flippers, it was just a transaction and they didn't think beyond that the next deal, right? So that was frustrating. I wanted to figure out what are people doing that are actually creating true wealth, that are truly um, setting themselves apart from the rest. And so that was the kind of the reason for the show. I wanted to educate myself and I wanted to educate other people. And so one of the questions I ask is to every single person. It's the only question I ask to everybody is what are your three pillars of wealth creation? And I get so many amazing answers. It's awesome. I get the very tangible things, real estate, business, that type of stuff. But then I get a lot of the mindset and the philosophical things, and you get so many creative answers. And wealth, the cool part about the question is that wealth means something different for everyone. Some people it's certainly about the money, right? But other people it's about the energy that they get. It's about um the freedom, right? The resources. It's about the relationships. Um, so it's just it's different for everybody in what their pillars are and what they kind of feel is important. So it's a fun question for me to ask and to kind of just listen to people's answers.
I like the question. So, Todd, what are your three pillars of wealth creation?
Yeah, so it's funny because when people ask me that, I'm like, well, actually, I have a lot more than three. It's really hard to narrow it down to three, but there are things I really think are fundamental to creating wealth. And I am of the mindset that wealth looks different for everybody again, and it doesn't necessarily. This isn't all financial driven. So I think first and foremost, it's all about like getting yourself educated, understanding wherever you want to go, you have to understand how to get there. So getting yourself educated, focusing on, building that. And then the other thing about the education is learning how to learn. I think that's really important. You got to learn how to learn. You got to enjoy just always being educated. And just it's not only in your craft, it's in your mindset, it's the whole works, right? Uh, the next thing I think is so important, and so many people miss this step, is you've got to take action. You have to take action. So many people will get educated and they're the smartest person in the room, but they let that fear grip them. And so you've got to take action. You have to, you're going to have fears. Everybody has fears. But the difference from those who create and grow and do amazing things are how you fight those fears off. Can you fight those fears off? And can you take action? Look, we we always talk about thinking big, and thinking big is a really important aspect of it, but you have to take small, consistent steps forward. It's all about consistency, persistence. You're going to get knocked down. You're going to get beat up. My favorite quote is from the great philosopher Mike Tyson, right? Everybody's got a plan until he gets punched in the mouth.
Yeah.
And that is going to happen over and over and over in business. And so that's huge if you're going to build your pillars of wealth. It's about taking action, fighting off those fears, and continuing to push forward whether you get knocked down or not. And everybody's going to get knocked down. Some of us are going to get knocked down really freaking hard, right? Where we're like living on the streets type of getting knocked down. And others of us are going to get, couple hits here and there and beat up, but we're all going to get hit. So resiliency, taking action, just that consistency, that whole thing there. And then the third one, and again, these are like bigger, right?
Yep.
So the third one is relationships. And you know, we have to figure out how we can surround ourselves with the right people. I grew up in a very modest household, amazing parents, love them dearly. Lots of brothers, sisters, love them dearly. But it wasn't a big business entrepreneur, think big mindset. It wasn't, we've got limiting beliefs. It wasn't hey, that you can do what you can do. But you have to figure out, even if you have that around you, everybody around you, you have to figure out how do you get into the right rooms with the right people. And a lot of that, quite frankly, comes from books, podcasts, conferences, like just getting around people. My mentors weren't people that I could see. It was the books I was reading. Those were my early on mentors.
Yep.
I just didn't have people that I knew that
And
were doing awesome things.
I think that of those three, if you look at get educated, take action, and then relationships, like who your network is, I think getting educated is as long as you spend the time, is the easiest thing to do. There's no risk with that, right? You're buying a $20 book, you're listening to a free podcast, whatever it might be. It's super easy to do.
Very easy.
Depending on who you are, taking action and the courage to take action may be easy, it may be difficult. I think different personalities struggle with that more than others, but I think that's absolutely an important one. I think the one that is most misunderstood or undervalued is the relationships and association.
Yeah.
And it's also hard
right.
because I don't want to reach out to that person. I don't want to ask that person for help. I don't want to ask that person to be a mentor of mine, or I don't want to go to this meeting because what will people think of me? So there's just all these fears or limiting beliefs around this relationship association. And I don't know if people understand the magnitude of the impact it is. Therefore, they don't get over those limiting beliefs a lot of time. So I think that they're all great, by the way. At the end of my podcast, I'll talk about get educated, associate with others, take action, and lead. That's what I say. So we're very aligned on those. I just think number 3, that relationship association, people undervalue it and therefore because of that, they don't prioritize it enough. Do you agree, or
100%.
what do you think?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It's easy to, again, it comes back to that I can do it myself type of mentality. It's easy and it's easy or it's hard to truly, especially for a lot, there's some people that are just super extroverted and like they're just going to get along with everybody like them relate. So that might be the easiest thing for them. But for I'd say the vast majority of people, they've got some sort of introverted part of them. For me, I'm extrovert once I get to know you. I'm not like, I'm not going to a conference and shaking everybody's hand. I'm kind of waiting for people to come to me. Right. So it's a little bit more difficult, but yeah, you've got to figure out how to get in the room with people. You've got to figure out how you can ask questions, how you can help.
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing that a lot of people like figure out. What I tell people is like, look, figure out what the problem is for that person, and it might not even be a business aspect. Like, look, if I went and told you, like, I love to ski, I love downhill skiing. It's my favorite. I know one of my bucket list items is and this is true. One of my bucket list items is to heliski. Like, look, man, if your best friend runs a heliski business and you can get me booked with him and get me a great price and set me up and all that kind of stuff, and you're going to come with me, like, dude, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Let's figure that out. Right. So figure out, and maybe that you don't have that resource, but maybe you do have if I want to learn how to play an instrument, but I don't know how, but you know how to play that instrument, or somebody that does, and you can hook me up, like, great.
And it's just such an accelerator as well. Like the people with whom you associate, it's such an accelerator, especially if they've done it or like heli skiing, if they've done that, it's going to be such an accelerator to you learning that and you getting good at it and overcoming the fears of taking action on it. So I think all of those
You,
together are so important to
yeah,
do.
yeah, yeah. One more thing on the relationships. I think of when we went to Europe for the first time. Like going to a foreign country is not it's a little intimidating, right? Especially when they don't speak your language. Well, the first time we went to Europe, but I already knew somebody who is from Germany, so we visited them. Him and his fiance spoke every like language around that we were going to be visiting, and they knew the country, and so it was really easy for me to feel comfortable, for my wife to feel comfortable, be assimilated extremely quickly. Like we felt like we were at home. Had we not had the mentor, had we not had the relationship, we would have been stumbling around trying to figure things out. We probably wouldn't have seen half of what we saw, right? We saw countryside that most Americans never see because they buy a book or they
Yeah.
look online and that's what they see. We got to hang out with people from Europe that really knew it, though they were our quote unquote mentors. They're our
Right.
relationship.
And I think that's a perfect tie back to your original point, which is the pillars of wealth creation. People think money, but it's not about money. You just gave a very specific example of relationships and association that has nothing to do with money. It's about going and getting a great experience in a foreign country, right? So if that's your health, if that's your faith, if that's your relationships, if that's business and financial wealth, all these things that you just talked about apply to every single area of life. So very, very good stuff, Todd. What I want to switch gears a little bit to kind of the closing segment here. What has been, if you were to define your key factors to success, if we haven't covered them already, what would those be?
Yeah, I mean, we've probably kind of hit on them, but I, I'll try to add maybe some different things, right? So I think a big factor is just knowing and understanding why I want to do what I want to do. And when things get tough, like thinking back about what I want to truly achieve. And a lot of it's it has to do with my faith and serving. And so I think that's really important is just understanding why you want to get where you want to where you're trying to go, right? Because again, you are going to get punched in the face, and it's easy to get knocked down. And I could have many times taken the easier path, and I have taken the easier path. I probably could be sitting here talking about a bigger business than I have, but um, if you don't have your why, it's really easy to just walk away
Yeah.
from it. So I think that's one big part. Um, boy, you know,
Well,
focus is another one. We're filled with so many distractions um, in the world, and it's really easy to get off focus. And so I think with that, it's just discipline and focus and understanding like people, if you follow the herd, you're going to get the herd results. And so if you're going to turn on the TV when you get home and watch an hour of the news or whatever, you're going to get those results, right?
yeah.
So stop being distracted by all the noise that's out there. Be able to focus, really be able to be disciplined in that manner. And it's tough because everybody else is doing it. Your relationships, your friends, like they want to go out to the bar on Thursday. Is that really where you should be going?
Yeah, and I
You know?
think, I mean, what you said there, just getting clarity and knowing your why. I love that yours is faith based and just a servant mindset too. But getting clarity on that, it helps, I think, with your focus. And if you're disciplined, or what, quite frankly, if you have those things, you will be more disciplined because of it. And just keep working on that as well. I would say, right, is just
Yeah.
keep working on getting clarity. And I think the clarity question is, okay, what like what do you want to do? But then if you want to take it faith based, you might even ask, what is God's purpose for you, or what is, what I mean? You can ask the bigger
Yeah.
questions and really get more
100%.
clarity and focus.
100%. Yeah. For me, I mean, I think my purpose is to affect thousands of people, like positively affect thousands of people. And part of doing that is building a bigger business and having apartment buildings that are great, nice apartment buildings that can serve my residents and can have, employees and, so I mean, it all kind of ties together, right?
And I think for anyone, I mean, again, extremely interesting, just the similarities, but some of that work and growing, and you're probably at a financial position now, or maybe, it's not just about that anymore. It's about other reasons. And the financial growth or the growth can probably be heavy at times, but when you have a bigger purpose of serving others, yes, it's heavy, but it's for a good, but it's for a good reason.
Yep. 100%.
Awesome. I want to ask about books. So, what is the most impactful business or real estate book that you have read?
Man, there's a lot of great ones out there that I really love. How to Win Friends and Influence People is maybe one of my favorites. But boy, I mean, if I dig in, I could bring up my list of books, and there'd be a ton more. How to Win Friends and Influence People is a great one. Building a Story Brand's another really good one if you're trying to raise money or give a presentation. Building a Story Brand's another great one. There's so many though. E-Myth. I mean, you
Yeah,
name it.
E-Myth is
Like,
good. Some great ones there. I'll check out Building a Story Brand. I've not heard that. How to Win Friends and Influence People. I love when people bring up old books that are classics and just timeless principles that don't change,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
Awesome. Todd, this has been great. How can people find out more about you?
Yeah, appreciate that. So enduruscapital.com, ENDURUS capital.com. You can find me there. You can link up, shoot me an email, todd@enduruscapital.com. You can find my podcast there. Podcast is called Pillars of Wealth Creation. So get in touch with me there.
Todd, I really appreciate this. It's been fantastic. I have a lot of notes myself. But that's a wrap for today for the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. Signing off. Thank you for listening to the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. We hope you found today's episode helpful. If you know current or aspiring investors or entrepreneurs or anyone that would benefit from today's episode, we appreciate you sharing it with them, or better yet, providing us a 5-star review. To learn more about Moeller Real Estate, visit our website at www.moellerre.com. You can also sign up for our newsletter or local events via our website. In closing, I encourage you to be purposeful in all areas of life, educate yourself, network with others that have been successful, take action, and lead. Thank you.